Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast podcast. I am your host, Kris, and it feels like forever, doesn't it, boys and girls? But alas, it's only been a short week. It just feels like longer because this is technically Easter Monday. I am joined this evening by my resident co-hosts, Ross and Josh. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Evening.
Now we have an absolute absolute truckload of things to get through, and various clubs have suffered different fortunes is where I was going to go with that. So we're going to do things a little bit differently this evening, in that we're going to sort of go a bit back to front. It's all gone wonky, as Danny would say. We're going to do the EFL stuff first of all, and then come on to the Premier League, because for those of you listening overseas, or for those of you that maybe don't follow the Championship, there's been a lot of games played today on Easter Monday, so we're going to go through those first of all. So let's see where we are then in the Championship in particular, because that's where a lot of the action has happened today. First of all, we'll have to go to Josh, because Josh, Brighton, well, I mean, they're up, aren't they? A 2-1 victory today over Wigan. You were there. How's it feel to be a Premier League side?
Yeah, hot off the train back from the stadium, and after invading the pitch, it's almost official. Brighton, based on the result of the Huddersfield game, which is going on at the moment, are basically up. For Huddersfield to really challenge, Brighton need to lose all their games, and they need to overturn a 30-plus goal difference to even trouble them. So I think it's pretty safe to say we can now look at getting the title with what's happened elsewhere. Today, with Newcastle's result, I think that's certainly a possibility now. Just trying to do some quick maths, 7 points clear. I think it's next week as the title decider.
I think you're being very, very modest there, Josh.
Yeah, you are as well.
Well, let's put it this way, that I think a lot has come out this week, especially today, about the achievement that Brighton have made. We've seen a lot of clubs be mismanaged and sold down the profit line, where clubs have stripped assets from them. And 20 years ago, that happened to Brighton. I only live about a 5-minute walk from the old Goldstone ground, which is now a shopping centre containing a Toys R Us and the like. Brighton were left homeless, and it was only for a local businessman, Dick Knight, who came in, saved the club. It was almost to this weekend, on the day that they were rock bottom of the grid, or the pyramid, ready to fall out of the league, and a last-minute goal saved the club. And to now come to the Premier League, have a brand new stadium, have an ownership that is just working for everybody involved, not just the club itself, but the city is also benefiting. The way that they've looked after even people who aren't football fans. The rest of them have seen, local businesses have seen the upside of what Brighton have brought, with helping with the train strikes that have happened along the time. And just look at what's happened in the 20 years, and it's incredible that they've had an owner that has sucked the life out of a club for profit, and they've managed to hold on. And it's a thing for the fans of the likes of Leyton Orient, Portsmouth, Coventry to look at and say there is a silver lining to your cloud. And Brighton is proof and testimony of that, that you could turn it around and become successful again.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course in style as well. They played some very, very good football this season. Ross, is it in a weird way kind of beneficial that Kris Utd didn't actually go up last season? I mean, I know it's a weird thing to say, but in hindsight now you can look back and say, were they really ready last season, or are they more ready this season?
Ooh. It's difficult because I see Brighton as the quintessential championship side. You know, they have played their way out of this division, but they've also fought their way out. They've done it on a budget that wasn't the size of Newcastle. They have done so well on all fronts. You know, in recruitment, in playing staff, in just absolutely everything. So it's difficult to say, because last season they were essentially this team again. You know, but this season they've had a bit of an easier time in the league because we didn't have the same thing we did last year, where 3 or 4 teams were clumping it up for nearly the entire season. You know, they had 89 points last season and missed out on it. This year they've got, at the moment, 92. So they have benefited, I think, from the league changing from the 3 teams that went up last season, and some of the teams that came down obviously not finding their form. You think of the likes of Aston Villa, who many people would have thought had been near the top, and Norwich City as well. So for me, I think they're relatively the same as they were last year, but obviously they have improved in areas. But I think if you'd said to Brighton fans last year, all right, we're going to keep you in the Championship for another season, but next season you're going to go up as champions, I suspect they'd have been okay with that.
Yeah, especially with saying to us that you'd have the kind of squad depth where you're bringing on the likes of Jamie Murphy and Oliver Norwood to basically see out a game. And that's just not been a thing at Brighton for a while, to have that kind of squad depth. It has always been a first 11 that can go out and compete, but now there's people coming off the bench that can do it, and youngsters coming through as well. The likes of Solly March, who got the second goal. We've been singing his praises all year, I think, especially Ross wants him down slightly more west on the south coast, down at Southampton, but he was absolutely superb today. Glenn Murray showing everything that you'd expect from an experienced centre forward, and just the whole team played incredibly well, especially with the first choice centre backs not necessarily being there. It's Hunemeyer coming in. Golson's obviously out for the rest of the season, but they've not needed to really dip into the transfer market any further to try and bolster the squad. The squad depth has been there, except for the centre backs when I think it's Foreign is currently there, but he wasn't even on the bench today. So I think overall it is very positive for Brighton fans like myself.
Yeah, positive is definitely the word. And unlike yourself and probably Kris Utd, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say you're up. I don't really care what anyone else says. There's no way that they're getting caught now. So it just remains to be seen whether they're going to be champions or not, because Ross, Newcastle lost to Ipswich 3-1. What's happened to Newcastle? I mean, they were billed as the favourites for the Championship. I know we've kind of crossed this path a few times before, but they weren't very impressive the other night against Leeds and shipped a very late equaliser last Saturday in the weekend's fixtures. They've lost again today. Is it just a case of, well, we know we're going up, so we'll just play out the season? Because at the moment, obviously, we're recording whilst Huddersfield are playing Derby. They're currently a goal up. The gap is only 5 points. There's a real danger here that if Newcastle don't start winning games again, they could end up in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the caveat to that is that Huddersfield also have a game in hand. So they've got the Derby as we speak, and like you said, they're 1-0 up. I can't remember off the top of my head who their game in hand is against, but I think it's one they could possibly win. So then you're looking at a gap that's about 2 points. So the pressure is on Newcastle. I think the stat is they've only won twice in 7 games. And I remember saying on the EFL special we did probably about 3 weeks ago now that I'm going to pick Newcastle for the title, but I think I'm going to regret it. And here we are now. We're into the run-in, and it looks like they've lost their championship savvy, if they ever had it. It was the reason that I tipped Norwich to win the league at the start of the season. It was the reason I tipped Brighton to win it for most of this season. Because for me, as good as Newcastle are, they did just lack that championship savvy, the fight and the grit to see out games. You know, they just weren't, I don't want to say they hadn't adjusted to this league because they've been in it for an entire season now, but I think a team like Brighton just had a bit more knowledge about them and just were a bit more astute in the way they handled games. So I don't think Newcastle are in any real risk of missing out on the top 2. I think they've still got too much quality for that. At the same time, it doesn't shock me to see that Brighton are now pulling away in the title race. And if Huddersfield do catch them, you do worry for them, you know, because like I say, it's championship savvy. I think that's the reason that Brighton are going to win the league now. And to be then stuck in the playoffs would be an absolute nightmare for Newcastle, not just because they're expected to go up, but because they've got to handle another thing that the Championship is famous for, something else that I don't think Newcastle are going to be entirely prepared for. So it'll be difficult. It will be difficult. They need to make sure they get the 3 points next time out, but I still think they'll be all right for the top 2.
Yeah, I think they probably will be okay, but nevertheless, not making it easy. Their run-in is Preston at home, Cardiff away, and Barnsley at home, whereas Huddersfield have got home to Fulham, away at Wolves, which is the game in hand, away at Birmingham, more on them in a minute, and home to Cardiff. So very similar run-ins for both sides. But we'll talk about the playoff situation now as well, and we'll start probably with the team that I guess everyone expects to be in the playoffs now, especially after a 2-1 victory today, although they made it hard, and that would be Reading. Josh, 2-1 victory over Rotherham. Are Reading that kind of sleeper team that's coming into the playoffs? Because I don't think a lot of people expected Jack Stam to be quite as good as he has been. They got a come-from-behind victory over Rotherham today.
Yeah, I think after the result last week, not conceding was probably high up on the agenda. They played Norwich 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? But
yes,
either way, they
big win.
Yeah, that one. Of course, they beat Villa on Saturday. But yeah, it's good to get 2 wins on the bounce again and get some more momentum when you go into the playoffs. I think when Jaap Stam came in, it was a bit of like a hipster's appointment. You're thinking, what can he do here? Because it's fairly unproven as a manager. He's done his apprenticeship though. Everything that we've called for when you see ex-players, you expect them to do an apprenticeship in a lower league team or league in Europe as an assistant, and then come in for a bigger job. So it's a really interesting appointment for them, and I think it's working out really well. I did expect them to be fairly high up the table, just due to the squad they actually have at their disposal. Didn't expect them to be up at 3rd, but I think that's more to do with the teams around them failing to really capitalise on good form. I'm sure we'll come to the likes of Leeds and Norwich and Huddersfield later, but to get a win, Rotherham seem almost resurgent in the last couple of weeks after they've been confirmed, got that weight off their shoulder, seem to be playing with a bit more freedom and challenging teams, which is a bit of a shame because it's all a little bit too late.
Always the way when the pressure's off, isn't it? Always the way. And the pressure is very much on the next 2 teams for us that we want to focus on, which is Fulham and Sheffield Wednesday. Fulham are still doing the bizzo. 3-1 victory today over Aston Villa, helped in no small part by a rather ridiculous red card for Jonathan Kodjia. So 3-1 victory at the Cottage for Fulham, who overall looked impressive. Another goal for Ryan Sessegnon there as well. And Sheffield Wednesday winning away at QPR by 2-1. So it's kind of as you were, Sheffield Wednesday 5th, Fulham 6th. Which of those two is the pressure on at the moment coming into the last 3 games? Because both have got sort of difficult-ish run-ins.
Have you seen their last game?
It's together, isn't it? The 2 playing each other on the last day. So, yeah, are we going to have an end-of-day playoff, or is the pressure on one in particular of the 2 sides?
If before today, I would have said the pressure is on Fulham. But we haven't talked about the team that the pressure has been really put on in Leeds United. I think Sheffield Wednesday and Fulham, after today's round of fixtures, will actually both be okay. I think they'll both look at the table and go, yeah, you know what, I feel comfortable, I feel better, at least at the moment, because we could now be in a situation where, although for weeks it's looked like Sheffield Wednesday and Fulham would go all the way down to the wire and it would be decided on that last game, we could now be in a position where Sheffield Wednesday and Fulham make it into the top 6 because of what's been happening with Leeds. So I don't think there's more pressure on either side. I think the pressure has now been completely transferred onto Leeds United, but at the same time, I think the team that will be fighting the hardest for it will probably be Fulham, because they're not expected to be there. They were relegation fighters last season. Jokanovic has done a fantastic job with them this campaign, easily one of the best teams to watch in the league. But they are still overachieving, and I think they will have a bit more fight and hunger about them to get themselves over the line. But in terms of pressure, I think that's firmly on the shoulders of Leeds United now.
Yeah, they've gone off a cliff, Leeds, recently, haven't they? Form-wise, three defeats and a draw in the last 5. Only one win in that series of results as well. So they are, definitely looking over their shoulder. Norwich, I think, are officially now too far back. So it's going to be one of, you'd think, Sheffield Wednesday, Fulham or Leeds, one of those 3 is not going to make 2 of those places. So,
to play devil's advocate on Leeds United, if they don't make the playoff, can you see Cellino getting rid of Gary Monk?
It's Cellino, isn't it? So
yeah, that's
probably
what I was thinking on the way back from the game, was looking through the rest of the results and thinking if Leeds have dropped out, especially with the goal difference on Fulham especially, they might not be able to make it back in. And I think with a team like Leeds and the way that they've gone this season and the teams that are looking to be in the playoffs, it does reek slightly of a failure for not being able to make the playoffs, and I could see a trigger-happy chairman look to dispose of his manager.
I think the other thing to say about that is that the Leeds United season ticket holders are owed a half-price refund if they don't make the playoffs this season. So if Gary Monk ends up costing Cellino not just the top 6, but also a heck of a lot of money out of his own pocket, then maybe. But at the same time, I think he would be mad to do it, because the turnaround for Leeds has been absolutely dramatic, and they have been dragged up this division by Kris Wood, who's, I think, on 23, 24 odd goals this season. I would be shocked to see it happen. At the same time, I really wouldn't, because it's Cellino. But I think you have to factor in that hit to his pocket as well. If they don't make the top 6, then he's going to have to shell out a lot of money as well. So Monk does have to be careful.
Yes, he does. Indeed, he does. Speaking of being careful, we'll have a quick look at the bottom end of the table as well. It's kind of looking like, how far do we go up? I think we'll probably go up as far as 20th, and we'll speak about that club in a minute. But, Josh, of the teams in 23rd, 22nd and 21st, you've got 3 sizable clubs there that have all been Premier League clubs in the past years. One indeed is two indeed former champions of England in Nottingham Forest, Blackburn and Wigan, reading down rather than we know have gone. Who's most in danger there? Because Blackburn got a draw against Bristol City today, having been behind. Wigan obviously losing to Brighton, and Nottingham Forest losing to Cardiff. So of those 3, I mean, it's going to be 2 of those are going to have to go. By the looks of it anyway, or two places are still to fill. So who's under the most pressure and why at the moment?
Well, I saw Wigan today, obviously in the flesh, and they were absolutely awful. One piece of quality led to their goal, but otherwise they didn't really threaten. I think they are gone, Wigan Athletics. I can't see them turning it around. Although you can't really judge a bottom place team on their performances against a team at the top of the table. I think we wouldn't be saying that, Sunderland are going to be relegated based on their performances against Chelsea and Tottenham. But from what I've seen, and it being at this end of the season and so little games to go, they really just don't look effective at all going forward. And at the back, they look solid enough, but at the moment they need 3 points on the board every game. A draw is not going to be good enough for them in any of their remaining fixtures. So I think they are gone, and it is between Nottingham Forest and Blackburn. I've still got this nagging feeling at the back of my mind that says Nottingham Forest are going down this season. I still think it could happen. However, Blackburn Rovers are showing that they're very hit and miss. Not sure what they'll be able to do. A draw against Bristol City, who haven't got the greatest away record in the league. It's going to be tight between those 2. But I would think with Forest losing to Cardiff, who I've also seen this season and wasn't particularly impressed with, I think it could be Forest going down.
Could be a massive club to go down. Arguably one of the biggest clubs to ever go down to that tier of English football. But I have left one other club out, Ross. I mean, arguably you could put Bristol City and Burton Albion, who are both 48 points. They're only 3 points ahead of Forest on 45 and in 21st. But there's one rather large sort of floating mass of blue that we haven't mentioned yet. And that floating mass of blue no longer has a manager as of this evening. Birmingham City. Lost again to Burton Albion today at home, and that's the end of Gianfranco Zola.
Yeah, he has resigned. Let's make it clear he hasn't been sacked, he has resigned. Noises from the club were that they were going to stick with him regardless, whether they were League One next season or not. They were going to be sticking with Gianfranco Zola. 2 wins in 22 games. They were joint 6th when he walked in. They are now 3 points off the bottom. It's been on the cards for months. I've been on this podcast tearing my own hair out over Birmingham City because they were just so good under Gary Rowett. The new management went in. They ridiculously decided to sack him, and it's been downhill ever since. And unfortunately for the fans, the owners got exactly what they deserved when they got rid of Gary Rowett and brought in Gianfranco Zola, because I think they looked at what he did with Watford and said, yep, we want to see that here. And then they didn't give him any finance or any real support in January to bring in the quality of players he needs to do that. And eventually they've just been dragged further and further down. The confidence has got lower and lower, the morale has dropped, and now they're in a position where they are right in the middle of this relegation fight. If Zola was still there, he would have been my pick or Birmingham would have been my pick to go down. Because I remember on the EFL special we did the other week, I said that I don't think Birmingham will go down because they've got these games against Rotherham and Burton and they should get the points there. They only took 1 point out of those 2 games, and the remaining fixtures are much more difficult than those 2. So if Zola was still there, I would have said Birmingham were going to go down. But now that he's gone, maybe the assistant can come in, maybe they can get a coach up from the reserves, wherever it may be. They can get someone in that can just return Birmingham to the team that they were under Rowett, keep things simple, hit people on the counter, play to their own strengths rather than try and transform themselves into something different. And maybe now they can get the points they need. But Birmingham is still right in this. Just because Zola's gone doesn't mean the problems are fixed. So don't count them out just yet, but certainly I think there are clubs beneath them that have more chance of going down still.
Trouble is, who on earth would want that job, especially with it? I mean, I suppose if you look at somebody who can just do a job to the end of the season and then carry them on next season, it might be a sort of appealing job. But I mean, I have no idea who they're going to get in for 3 games?
Yeah, 3 games.
Yeah, it's not looking good, is it, for Birmingham? And what a large sized club to be in that situation. And if Forest went down, would you say they are the biggest club to ever hit League One? Because I can't think of anyone bigger. Coventry, maybe.
Well, I suppose in reverse engineering, Man City. When they went down.
Yeah.
But
I suppose
it is a bit like upside down because they had their all their success on their way back up.
Yeah, they weren't the club they are now then, whereas Forest have never really been. They've always been a big name, whereas I would argue Man City were never really a. I'm going to upset a lot of Man City fans now, aren't I? But I would argue that Nottingham Forest are a bigger club historically than Man City. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
I think that is fair. I think most Man City fans that I've spoken to are quite level-headed about how they've come into it. Unlike other fans that have had money pumped into them, they are fully aware that they used to be not a very good team. And still, every so often, will say, yeah, we could still Man City this up. I think I'm the same way with Brighton. I've seen them in the lower leagues. I've seen them throw away leads that they shouldn't. And I think Man City fans are still a little bit overawed. They're less entitled than other fans.
I'm sure Chelsea fans have no idea what you mean by that comment. Yeah, I do think it's a big step down for Nottingham Forest if they do indeed go. But one thing's for sure, with 3 weeks to go or 3 games to go, is plenty to play for. And as the weeks tick by, we'll probably get a clearer outcome of what's going on. But one thing we do have a clear outcome of before we slip out of the EFL again for another week, Ross, I'm going to sort of hand over to you for kind of a mini roundup of what's the big stories really out of Leagues 1 and 2, because we've had some promotions and we've had some championship wins, and I suppose we should probably start with Sheffield United and Kris Wilder, who are champions of League 1. So what's been going on down in League 1 and League 2?
Yeah, Sheffield United officially went up as champions this weekend. I think that was done and dusted on Saturday when Oldham beat Bolton, but today they put the finishing touches on it with a 3-0 win against Bradford. I know, Chris, I think that was the first time you'd seen them this season, and they played some champagne football at times. They were brilliant to watch. You've also had some relegations confirmed. Last Friday we had Coventry officially down in a 1-1 draw against Charlton, a game that was held up for about half an hour because of a plastic pig protest when both sets of fans decided to throw them onto the field. I think they did the same thing as well in the reversed fixture earlier in the season. And then today, Monday as of recording, Chesterfield also went down. They were beaten by Scunthorpe, and that officially puts Chesterfield down into League 2. It does also secure the playoff place for Scunthorpe in League 1. I think Scunthorpe's slide, I mean, we've been documenting that for a while now. They still have an outside chance of making it into the top 2, but Bolton do have a game in hand and are 3 points clear of them. And Fleetwood Town as well still be looking for that second place. But again, Bolton still having that game in hand on them. And I think that's all the official business that was done this weekend in League 1. But like I say, Kris, you saw Sheffield United today, and champagne football at times. I'm personally really looking forward to seeing them up in the Championship next season.
Yeah, Chris Wilder's done a magnificent job there, hasn't he? Because, I mean, I remember when Sheffield United were seen as the big failure of the lower league at the time when they dropped down at the Championship, and the days of Warnock were behind them, and some of the stuff they played today, like, genuine now. I was really impressed. I appreciate the pressure was off a little bit, and you know, Bradford had a lot to play for in this game, didn't they, as well, to potentially make the playoffs themselves, and they just got totally swept aside. There were times in this game where they just couldn't get near the ball. It was just really, really impressive to watch. And yeah, I'll freely admit I don't get to see as much of the sort of lower end as I may like to. But no, really impressed with Sheffield United. And as I say, I think Chris Wilder deserves a huge amount of credit for what he's done. Is it Northampton he was at before?
Yeah.
I think was it before, and I think he was up the top with them, wasn't he, before he took the Sheffield United job? So he's clearly got something about him, this chap, and I think he'll be looking to take it on. And as you say, depending on what happens with Wednesday, we might see another Steel City derby next season.
I really like the look of Sheffield United, and I think they're going to be quite comfortably safe next season if they can add in a couple of extra faces. I think they finally found the magic tonic that they needed, because I think they've been down there for about 7 years now, so it's been a hell of a long wait, but I think it might just have been worth it, because they seem to have got one of the best Sheffield United teams I can ever remember. You know, even back in the Premier League days, this one just looks so powerful and so good across the field.
Young as well.
Yes, and John Fleck, I don't think he had his best game today, but John Fleck is a midfielder that I really like. I think he's got a big future in the game as well. League 2 then. We did have the top 3 sewn up this weekend. Doncaster went up, I believe it was last week. I think we covered that on the last podcast. Only really the title to fight for them now. They lost this weekend, which opens the title race right back up. But Plymouth and Portsmouth both won today and are now both going back up into League 1. Plymouth have been gone for 6 years, and they ended up scoring 6 goals today, so I imagine that was sweet relief for Plymouth. Portsmouth, I think, have been down there for 4. I've watched them for at least 2 of those while I was at university down there. They have had some very mixed fortunes in League 2. They have been absolutely dire at times. They've seen a massive player overhaul, but now they seem to finally have a balance. There's obviously rumours of this Michael Eisner takeover as well. So congratulations to Portsmouth and to Plymouth, both well deserving of their places back in League 1. The title race is realistically between Plymouth and Doncaster. The gap is only 3 points now, but I would still suspect Doncaster will win that unless they've really taken their foot off the gas. But still, at least there's something to play for at the top of League 2. The relegation zones, we're still not tied up here. I think most of us agree that Leyton Orient are going to be going down, but 4 points from their last 2 games. They managed to beat Hartlepool this weekend, which drags Hartlepool now a point from the bottom 2. If not for Newport County getting absolutely trashed by Plymouth, there's a good argument to be said here that Hartlepool would have dropped into the bottom 2, which I think if anyone other than Newport or Leyton Orient goes down, I think will be a massive shock, considering those two have both been so poor this season. Leyton Orient, I think, are still probably down. Like I say, they're 7 points from safety. They, for the last 2 games, have been able to avoid officially going down. I still think they're doomed, unfortunately, but their biggest fights are happening off the field still. And we've also had Blackpool move into the playoff places, and I wanted to mention the playoff places mainly because the gap between all the teams in the race is still so tight. The gap between 4th place Luton and 13th placed Wickham is just 6 points, and there is a myriad of teams in there that could still make this. Blackpool moved into the top 7 this weekend, Carlisle falling out of it. it's really difficult to call, and I know that there'll be some people hoping for some hints and some tips maybe as we get into the latter end of the season about who might be going up from League Two. But honestly, I couldn't tell you. Regardless of how the playoff places finish and who gets there, it's just a completely ridiculous situation in League Two, and anyone could win it. So, if you're looking for a bet for League Two, I would avoid it at all costs. But Kris, Plymouth, you live in the area. I think it's been a long time coming for them, and deservedly won it, or at least came second this year, and are now going back up to League One, which I think is the very minimum that they deserve.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. It's a nice sunny day here today, and the ground home park is only, it's just literally up over a hill from where I live, and I can hear the supporters when they're at home. And atmosphere was great today. Really, really good fans on the pitch at the end. All the usual jazz that I'm sure that Josh experienced at Brighton. But yeah, Argyle are they're a very, very big club for this area. It may not be a historically huge club or known all around the world, so to speak, but they are a massive club in this area. The only Argyle, of course, in the Football League, it has to be said. It's huge for the area. It's also huge for the future of the club, because they're looking to rebuild Home Park. They're looking to add this stand. The owners or the new owners they've got in place, James, his name escapes me. Is it James Bray? I can't remember his bloody name. The chap who took over, wealthy businessman, is looking to sort of take the club up to another level. And it's very easy to forget that only a couple of years ago they were a Championship side, under Ian Holloway and the likes of Sylvan Evanks Blake, etc. in that side. So there is the potential there, and if they can get the pricing structure at the ground right, and they can get people coming back to the games next season in League One, they've got a real fist at going sort of close at the playoffs at least next year as well. So they've got some very, very good young players. It will be a very, very busy summer, I think, for Derek Adams. Yes, I do think that it's a really good achievement for Plymouth, and like you say, minimum they expected. I think they wanted to go up, and the only other thing to mention is, of course, how many teams do you see lose a playoff final and then fall apart the next season? I think it shows real determination of characters at Argyle that Derek Adams has been able to get them back up, at the first time of asking, or properly up this time at the first time asking, and put aside the disappointment of that playoff defeat last season. So, yeah, well done to Plymouth, and it's a good weekend in the South Coast on the whole, given Plymouth, Portsmouth, and Brighton. So we'll come on to Southampton, don't you worry, Ross. But very, very good for Plymouth. Well done to them.
Yeah, I was also going to say about Portsmouth, and on the topic of the South Coast, Josh, we've now got Portsmouth back up, Plymouth back up, Brighton going up. Bournemouth will look to be safe for another year in the Premier League. Southampton is safe for another year in the Premier League. It's quite the South Coast renaissance compared to where we were about 5 or 6 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Out of all of those teams, at least 4 of those have flirted with going out of business in the past decade or so. So there's certainly a big change from there, and we've seen the flip with the North East kind of drop down in the quality of its football in recent years. But I would think very happy to see 3 South Coast sides in the Premier League, and hoping to make sure it's still 3, or at least Brighton's still there, and probably Southampton the following season.
I think the only other thing I wanted to touch on briefly as well was the League One situation with some of those big clubs that are there, Ross. Why is it that you think there's so many big names? I suppose you could even stretch this to League Two as well. Why is there so many big names that seem to be falling? We've touched on the Championship, but I look down that League One table, and there's so many clubs that are in that league at the moment. As I say, you could argue League Two as well. But why is it? Is it purely down to money? That you look at that situation, you think, well, there's so many teams that probably should be higher up than where they are. Just to give you a couple of names to put flesh on the bones here. Bolton might end up going up, but Bolton, Bradford, Millwall, Southend, Oxford, Peterborough, Charlton, Gillingham, Swindon, of course, all the way down the bottom, Coventry. There's a lot of big clubs there. Is it purely down to money? Or is it down to the money, given the fact, the monetary situation, given the fact that so many have got owners that, dare I say it, are not particularly invested in the clubs they're buying?
Yeah, I think there's a stronger case to say that it's mainly ownership, because a lot of those clubs have had poor ownership as of late. But there's also a lot of those clubs that either haven't benefited from having money or have been the victim of other sides having money. Because teams in League One, as of like the last 6 years that I can pull off the top of my head, Norwich, Leeds, Southampton, Brighton, Wolves have been down there. Leicester were down there a few years ago. You know, these are also big teams that have gone down, and they've just taken the oxygen away from many of the teams around them. And some other sides, like for example Sheffield United, have just missed out. And we had the same thing with Huddersfield. I remember when Southampton were in League One, Huddersfield were under Lee Clark, and they went on a run of about 40-something games unbeaten, and they still couldn't go up, because that year it was Brighton and Southampton choking out the league because they just had so much quality. And then Leicester went up, I think it was the year before Southampton were down there, and Norwich went up the year after. You know, there's been a lot of big teams down there that have just taken the league by storm, and I think there's some clubs, for example Millwall, who have gone up and down a couple of times in the last 6 or 7 years, but I think there are teams down there that just sometimes fall into it, don't have the same kind of money that their opponents do, and get caught out by it. So I think this year is, realistically speaking, the first year in a long while where there's not been one team that's just choked out the division with oodles of money, because Sheffield United and Bolton are not exactly swimming in it. So it's been a very good year for League One and for League Two as well. Like I said a minute ago with the cluster in the middle of the table, they're both fantastic divisions this year, but I think there are a lot of clubs that have just suffered from other clubs having money, even if not them.
I think there's also quite a few teams in there who we've seen that have come from higher up are the victims of the stick or twist mentality. You're looking at Charlton especially, when they were a safe team in the Premier League under Alan Kirbishley, and they got rid of him in a kind of, well, we could continue being mid-table, but we could push on, and it's just come back to bite them on the arse, so to speak. And there are a couple of clubs down there a bit like that have gone for the trying to push on, and it's just fired back at them, and they've just plummeted. Thinking back at even Blackpool, who are below them, not even in the league, fallen that far, but the likes of Bolton, Millwall, and Charlton, to say, will definitely fit that model of someone who has stuck and gone bust, twisted and gone bust.
It's just I just sort of glanced on that list and thought, wow, so many teams down there. But nevertheless, they all of course the teams down there in Leagues 1 and 2, and of course the Championship, all strive to reach the promised land, and that promised land is of course the money of the Premier League, which is where we will go to this week in our upside down, if I can put my teeth in, upside down show. So back to the Premier League we go then. I suppose we need to start at the top. Josh, Chelsea losing at Old Trafford, 2-0 to Manchester United. Ander Herrera was quite handy to have in the side. See what I did there? As he set up the first goal with a very, well, let's be honest, a very clear handball, but nevertheless a good finish from Marcus Rashford. We'll come on to him in a second. And then the second from Herrera himself, which was perfectly legitimate, this goal, has to be said. And Chelsea falling to defeat for the second time in 4 games. Is it a blip? Should we be concerned? I mean, I say we. Should Chelsea fans be concerned with this defeat?
I think I said this before when they got beaten by Palace, and I said that Conte wouldn't allow them to lose another game in a row. And I think that's still the case, that this is just a little bit of a blip. And to be fair, they're playing Manchester United away from home, and when they look at the fixture table or the fixture list coming out at the beginning of the season, they'd probably look at that and think, we'd do well to get away with the draw from there, especially going to the place of their former manager. And I think Jose just showed a perfect Mourinho-esque performance from a team where they just completely stifled Chelsea going forward and then just hit them on the counter with devastating style. And I don't think Conte had anything that he could do to counter that, and just looked completely shocked and overwhelmed by the whole situation, because anything he was trying just wasn't coming off. And I think it was just a bad day in the office for everyone involved.
A very bad day in the office indeed. And Ross, I just want to ask you a very quick question before we move on to Spurs, who are in this talk as well. Marcus Rashford, all that all a little bit overhyped. I listened to the commentary yesterday, and naturally, obviously Gary Neville knows a bit more about the player than I probably do. Well, than most of us, to be honest, probably do. He might have seen him when he was at United and when he was at England, but I'm not sure I buy all of this hype. Is that fair, or am I being a bit critical? I thought he played very well yesterday in a side that Mourinho picked, which was really different. I think we were all surprised when Zlatan was left out, but. Is he really, is he really all that, or is this a little bit too much too soon?
It is too much too soon. It's just the English media hyping people that have a bit of quality. We've seen it with Ross Barkley. He was the second coming when he first broke out, and he's faded away a bit. You saw it with Jack Wilshere, who was also the second coming, and then faded away a bit. Rashford is a very good player. You can't deny that he is a very good player for how old he is. I think he has also struggled from the fact that he's been played out of position, because I think he's better through the middle than he is out wide. The hype is definitely worth it. He's certainly a quality player, and I think he will have a very successful England career. At the same time, the English media, every time an English kid breaks out, we immediately think he's going to be our Lionel Messi, and unfortunately they never seem to be, and that's partly because of the pressure we put on them. So I understand it, yeah, of course I do, that you do hear it sometimes, and you just think, well, can we just cut the kid some slack and just let him play some football, At the same time, he's still a very good player. We shouldn't just dismiss him, because I think he certainly has got a big future ahead of him.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I always get a little bit tetchy. Well, tetchy, that's maybe the wrong word. A little bit sort of uncomfortable when we're lauding praise over players who've had 5 or 6 good games. But nevertheless, very good result that from United, and Mourinho proving that he can still outwit the very best of them. And to be fair to United, they picked a side that I think we all expected would get quite easily turned over, and they didn't, and there was a lot of hunger and a lot of fight about them, and fair play. As much as I'm not a huge fan of his, there was hustle and bustle and real drive. They didn't just sit back and defend, they really outwitted Chelsea. So yes,
should also be said before we leave this game that
yes.
John Terry has announced that he's leaving Chelsea end of the season.
You beat me to it. Yes, I was just thinking that. I just heard that's been announced today, hasn't it, that he's going to be leaving. Where do we think? China, MLS, one of the two? I guess so.
Probably MLS for a random guess, but I know I know America doesn't really pay attention to its big name defenders, does it? I think the biggest one I can think of is Ashley Cole, and other than that, they don't really sign them. And I don't think China's made any massive defensive signing yet, because they're trying to make football attractive, aren't they? They're trying to get the best attackers in the world over there. So I probably put them in the MLS, but it's tricky because defenders aren't glamorous.
Are you trying to say Liam Redgewell is not a big name signing, Ross?
That's Sean St Ledger as well, class act.
Sean St Ledger, yeah, absolutely. Go on, Josh. You wanted to mention something?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think certainly China is off the agenda for John Terry, but I think MLS is as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's leaving Chelsea to not necessarily go and play elsewhere, but to get his coaching badges. And Conte said, look, get a change of environment and then come back. And just, as we've seen with other players, that they've got to leave the club to experience something else, because he's been there his whole career, bar a loan spell very early in his career. He has been Chelsea through and through, and a one-club man. So he does certainly need to learn something new when it comes to how football clubs run. And I would expect a manager of the experience of Conte to have said that to him, had a decent sit down with him and said, look, yeah, you could coach at Chelsea, but to be honest, you already know how the club runs. Go and test yourself, because testing yourself at Chelsea isn't really going to be that much of a test for him, because he knows the club so well, and to actually mix it up.
Very true, very true. And breaking news, I think, Ross, I think Brighton are about to be official, aren't they?
You probably know more than I, because I'm slightly behind you by the sounds of things. Have Derby just scored?
Jacob Butterfield has just rattled one into the corner with 2 minutes to go.
Butterfield. Well, yes, if that result holds and there's only 3 minutes left on the clock, then yes, Brighton would officially be up. But like we were saying earlier, it's essentially done because of the goal difference. But yeah, if Derby can hold them 1-1, I'm still waiting on this goal to go in, then yes, Brighton would officially be up.
Huge deflection, by the way, but they'll take it. And speaking of John Terry, of course, if he does go to China or MLS, he'll have to be careful about where he parks his car. Anyway, on to Spurs, Ross, who They've won again at home. That's not a big surprise. They've won by 4 again at home. Not a big surprise. But they've beaten another side, which I think it's fair to say maybe aren't on the beach completely, but AFC Bournemouth pretty much safe. They came with 2 centre forwards, barely had a shot all game, and got rolled over very comfortably. One question I want to ask you, I mean, obviously we all know Spurs are in the title race, as much as it pains me to say that, naturally. But they won 4-0. They beat Watford, obviously, by a similar score. They've been very impressive at home. Even I have to, accept that. Is there a little bit of the overblown element to this Tottenham side, though? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of very good players, a lot of very good young players, but ultimately they are yet to win anything. They are second and in the position where they can just go out there and express themselves. And they have beaten quite a few sides recently that I think it would be fair to say if Chelsea had beaten, people just say, well, they're expected to beat them. Is that a fair criticism, or should we be lauding this Spurs side as the sort of coming force?
I think that we should be lauding this Spurs side as the coming force. I love Tottenham Hotspur at the moment, and I have ever since Pochettino went in there and really started getting under the hood. And I can't really say that in present company, so I've been rather modest, wherever I could, about Tottenham. But Tottenham are so good, so good. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Pochettino, but what he's done there since he's gone in there has been incredible. Because I remember when Tottenham were almost relegation fodder under, was it Juan de Ramos that almost got them relegated in 2010 odd? The change in that club has been dramatic, and the only thing that I can really see stopping Tottenham at the moment from getting a title, whether it's FA Cup, Capital One Cup, EFL Cup, whatever they're going to call it next year, or whether it's the Premier League, the only thing I can really see them slowing them down is the stadium move. The other thing is depth, because Vincent Janssen, is it Vincent Janssen? Either way,
yes,
the striker,
yeah.
He's not good depth, he scored a goal this weekend, his first from open play, and there's certainly signs of improvement, but I think when Harry Kane goes down, they still need someone in reserve. They've done very well, don't get me wrong, as of late since he's been out, but I still think they need another focal point if Harry Kane goes down. Depth, I think, is their biggest problem as a squad. As a team, though, as a club, I think everyone should be quite afraid of Tottenham, because I think they're settling in to a very good rhythm now. For 2 years in a row, they've been title challengers. Okay, Chelsea could still win this, clearly by 6, 7, 8 points yet, but it's the second time in 2 seasons that they've been right in it up until the death. I think they're the only team now that's got some stability in terms of their squad. And like I say, the only thing I can really see them slowing them down is the stadium move. I think they're absolutely fantastic, and although it will pain a lot of Arsenal fans to hear it, I think that it's just kind of one of those things that people need to start seeing, because it's almost impervious at times, and the performances they've put in as of late have been fantastic. And I know I'm kind of gilding the lily here with Tottenham at the moment, but they've only lost 3 games this season, and for all the praise that we've given Chelsea this year, they've lost 5. So I think Tottenham are here to stay. I think they're a big power now. I think they're only going to get better, but it depends entirely on how they survive the stadium move.
Well, I'd like to thank Ross for being a part of this podcast. He will not be invited back on again. I joke, of course. No, I think you make some fair points. I think it is fair to say that the hardest challenge, and trust me, as an Arsenal fan, Spurs fans will be enjoying what they are achieving right now. The biggest issue I think they're going to have is the stadium, because some of those big name players, in my opinion, are going to have to go if they're going to fund the stadium, and that's going to be the key as to whether they can build without them. And I'm sure a lot of envious eyes are looking around at Harry Kane and Dele Alli in particular, but as well as possibly those 2 centre backs. But as you say, you have to say right now they are the form side, and this title race, only 4 points in it with 6 games to go, suddenly has got very close, as Josh has the race for this top 4, which is suddenly incorporating 4 or 5 clubs now. We have to look at that. So Liverpool eking out a 1-0 victory over West Brom at the Hawthorns in, I have to say, a very, very forgettable game. Roberto Firmino with the winner in that one. Manchester City will savour us this week, winning 3-0 at St Mary's. Flattered them a little bit, I think, personally, but nevertheless, goals from company. Leroy Sané and Sergio Aguero killing off that particular game. Manchester United we've covered. Everton also with a win over Burnley, 3-1. Jagielka, Ben Mee and Lukaku with the Sam Vokes penalty. And Arsenal have got to play Middlesbrough this evening. So as it stands, Josh, we've got Liverpool 3rd, 66, Manchester City 64, Manchester United 5th, 60, Everton 6th, 57, Arsenal, time of recording 7th, 54, with 3 games in hand over Everton, 2 over Manchester United, 1 over Man City, and 3 over Liverpool. Who do you think is making this top 4? And more importantly, I suppose you could say, who do you think's missing out?
I think the top 4 will certainly have the top 2 in their current positions. I don't think Spurs can overtake Chelsea. That is all bias aside. I think the way that Chelsea are playing, they've got more than enough to keep Tottenham at arm's reach. I've got a feeling that although Liverpool got the points on the board, I think the teams below them can overtake. And I think the top 4 will look like the 2 Manchester clubs, beating the Merseyside club to top 4. Liverpool dropping into 5th. Maybe a little bit lower based on what Arsenal can do, but based on their recent run of form, I'm not so sure. They have been awful of late. I think we've both mentioned it in various times. We'll try to avoid the whole subject of how Arsenal are playing this season, or especially in recent weeks. But I think if they can get up to 19 wins through their games in hand, then I think they could challenge for 5th. But I'm not sure that they'll break into the top 4. And I think it will be the 2 Manchester clubs that are there. Liverpool dropping out with the likes of Mane and Lallana both ruled out for the season as well. It's not going to help them.
Yeah, I would not be far off that myself. Very quick aside, full-time at Pride Park. So officially, Brighton and Hove Albion are indeed a Premier League side. That is official, I should say. So well done to them.
Hooray!
Hey, Ross, your thoughts on the top 4 as well? For my 10 pence worth, I am, of course, the eternal optimist, but I have a feeling that Arsenal's run to top 4 starts this evening with a crushing victory over Middlesbrough, I hope. I think Arsenal will sneak it based on the games in hand. This would be typically Arsenal to go on a run now and prove a few people wrong, although, yeah, as Josh said, nothing supports my theory on that other than being a loyal fan of the club. I think Arsenal will end up 4th, and I think Manchester City will end up 3rd. I think it will be Liverpool, Manchester United that will ultimately miss out on the place in the top 4. I think United will actually win the Europa League. It pains me to say it with Lyon in the Europa League, but I think United will win that and end up getting into the Champions League that way. I think Everton will just not quite have enough, and I think Liverpool might run out of steam. Have you got anybody different in your top 4? Have you got sort of view on who you think is going to finish top 4?
Not really, because I suppose part of me is still very championship about this league, and I look at some of the teams that are in it, and I just think there's so many permutations and teams that need this and that, and the run-ins they've got. I just see it ending a bit messily for some teams. I think Manchester United will probably overreach themselves trying to get 4th and the Europa League, so I reckon they'll win the Europa League, but I think they'll probably miss out on the top 4. I think Liverpool might just sneak it. They finally got that win without Sadio Mane, so I think maybe they will probably learn that they can still do this. They've had a very good upturn of form. Manchester City, as much as they bored me to tears on the weekend against Southampton, I think they'll probably finish 4th and they'll come back stronger next season. Everton, a very good side, but I don't think they've got enough there. You know, we've already spoken about Lukaku and how many points he wins them, and you know how many he doesn't, and that sort of thing. I just think they're lacking a little bit extra to get them across the line. And Arsenal, I mean, a lot will depend on how they react to the what was it, Palace was your last result? A lot will depend on how they react to the Crystal Palace game. I would be stunned if Middlesbrough beat Arsenal tonight. I think Middlesbrough are just too gun-shy and just not good enough up front even to get around an Arsenal side that are in terrible form. But for me, I think that the 3 games you've got in hand, one of them is against Southampton, and I really fancy us against Arsenal. So, you know, it's tough. I think there's a lot of permutations, and a lot will depend on confidence and run-ins, especially when you look at Arsenal and Man United. But I think if I had to pick my top 4, it would be the same as it is now, honestly. Chelsea, Tottenham, Liverpool, Manchester City, in that order. But at the same time, if Man United go out of the Europa League, then I don't see why they can't do it. If Arsenal can get on a run, don't see why they can't do it. There's just too many permutations for me to be certain. But if I had to pick, my top four would be the current top four.
Fair enough. If there's one thing I can almost guarantee you is that Middlesbrough will score a goal this evening. I can almost guarantee you that because Arsenal's defence is not very good. So get your money on that, boys and girls. Right, we should have a look at the bottom of the end of the table as well, because weirdly this weekend was kind of all about the games played at the top against the teams played at the bottom. There's very little games without some kind of permutation on them. So we'll have a look at the results as a whole and then just have a general discussion with you both. So Stoke City 3-1 victors over Hull City. Arnautovic, Crouch and Shaqiri scoring for Stoke. Maguire had Hull level at one point, but they couldn't hold on. Palace drawing 2-2 with Leicester, 2-0 down Palace to Hus and Vardy goals, but Kabay and Benteke got it level at 2-2. West Ham and Sunderland same score there at the Stadium of Light. I think Sunderland still are gone, but a last-minute equaliser from Fabio Barini getting the point for Sunderland. At least they got a goal for once, and indeed a point. And Watford beating Swansea. Etienne Capoue back on the score sheet with the winning goal there. Josh, I'll start with you. I suppose it depends on Middlesbrough's result tonight, but I still think that Middlesbrough and Sunderland are gone. Sunderland definitely, and obviously if Middlesbrough do lose tonight, then they're 4 points adrift with only one game in hand over the clubs above them, and obviously they're not scoring goals. So if we assume Sunderland have gone and Middlesbrough are going, who does this weekend sort of affect the most almost? Because Palace are the only side, as I say, pre-game, Middlesbrough wise, the only side that are down that bottom end, excluding Sunderland, to get a point this weekend. So who do you think is going down as far as the results go at the moment?
It is a very, very tough question at the moment. I think Middlesbrough are down. Just looking at their form, they are picking up points in binary. It's 1 or 0. They're not really getting any wins, certainly not scoring many goals, and I think it is very tough. I'm sure some of them have got to play each other in the next couple of weeks. I can't think off the top of my head who it is. I'd have to dig into the fixtures, but I'm sure
looking
they
as
are.
we speak. I shall look them up for you.
I shall feel during that. Bournemouth have, I think they're probably most likely to be able to get out of it, but that might be just down to their style of football, especially when you've got Palace with the game in hand, who have also got Sam Allardyce at the helm, who appears to, after what happened with England and the early start to his regime at Palace, seem to have got them defending properly, and now picking up goals, and the form of Townsend, Zaha and Puncheon is certainly helping them out going forward. So I think they've got enough goals in the system. I think it is a straight shootout between Hull and Swansea, to be honest, for who takes that final place. And it's really difficult because I think both clubs made very good appointments managerially and had some good form off the back of it. But I think it might be Swansea that eventually bite the dust when it comes to their time in the Premier League.
I would be inclined to agree. Ross, I'm going to give you some fixtures here for the teams that are down there. Starting with Sunderland, who, as I say, I think we've kind of assumed that they're gone, but they actually play Middlesbrough on the 26th, which is a midweek fixture. That's away from home. I think their fate could be sealed if they lose that game. They then play Bournemouth. They're away at Hull. They're at home to Swansea, and they finish away at Arsenal. So, they say they finish at home to Arsenal. Perhaps the penultimate game, they finish away at Chelsea. So I don't think there's much points coming their way in the last two games. So I think it's safe to say we think Sunderland will go. As for Middlesbrough, obviously they play Arsenal tonight. They're away at Bournemouth next weekend. They then play Sunderland, as we said, at home. They then play Manchester City at home, Chelsea away. Home to Southampton and then away at Liverpool, so they're also looking quite considerably doomed. Hull City face Watford at home, Southampton away, Sunderland at home, that's the two playing each other there. Palace away, Spurs at home. I think that's actually their last fixture. It is indeed on the 21st of May. And Swansea finally, they've got Stoke City at home, Manchester United away, Everton at home, Sunderland away, and they finish with a home tie against West Brom. So call it. Who do you think? Are you are you sort of agreeing that Middlesbrough and Sunderland have gone? And if you are, who else goes?
I think Sunderland have gone. I think they've been gone for a very long time. Middlesbrough, much will depend on how they do tonight against Arsenal. And in a minute, I want your guys' response to the team sheet that's been put out by Arsenal. Middlesbrough, I think a lot will depend on how they do against Arsenal. If they can win that, then they're right back in the mix. If they don't, then yeah, I think they're gone. For me, I think Hull have the best run in, not because of some of their away games. Their away form has been really poor, but I think their home form is so good, and they do have some of the teams around them. I think Crystal Palace will be safe by the final game. Sunderland, I think, is more than winnable. So, based just on fixtures, I think that Hull City will be the ones that survive, and Swansea will be the ones that go down. Because I know, as much as I said at the start of the season that Bournemouth would be in my bottom three, I still think they've got enough about them, and I think the points gap is probably too much now between them and Swansea. So, for me, I think the bottom three stays as is. I think it's probably going to be Sunderland, Borough, and Swansea. But like I say, my opinion on Middlesbrough will change completely depending on how they do tonight. So, before we leave Borough, I do want to just give you the team sheet for Arsenal tonight, if you haven't seen it yet. Check in goal, a back four of Gabriel, Koscielny, Holding, and Monreal. Oxlade-Chamberlain, Ramsey, Xhaka, Ozil and Sanchez in midfield, and Giroud up front. Considering Holding's in there and Gabriel is on the wing, how do we feel about that particular lineup and your odds tonight?
I mean, I'm not surprised Hector Bellerin's been left out of this game. He's on the bench, but Gabriel at right back, I would imagine, is what they're going to do. I think a lot of Arsenal fans have been clamouring for Rob Holding to get a game. I'm actually a little bit surprised that Per Mertesacker wasn't preferred. He's not even on the bench, so that's interesting, given the fact he's been back in training for a few weeks. But Gabriel at right back, yes. Xhaka and Ramsey, I'm not convinced at all by that partnership. I just don't think it gives you enough defensive cover. My humble opinion. Oxlade-Chamberlain ahead of Walcott is a very interesting one because it doesn't strike me as a lot of pace, that midfield. Oxlade-Chamberlain and Sanchez behind Giroud. So this game's going to be one of those. It's either going to be all action, very exciting, and lots of goals, or it's going to be a very dull sort of drawn out affair. So, what do you think, Josh? What's your thoughts on it?
I think it shows the pressure that Arsene Wenger is under at the moment to just change his way of thinking. I think it's been a long time since we've seen such a radical change mid-season for a formation for Arsenal to go out in. I think they haven't really diverted from a 4-5-1 formation in the last 3 or 4 seasons. I don't think we've really moved from that at all. And beforehand, it was more of a 4-4-2 with the likes of Bergkamp and Henry up front. So this is a very, very interesting game. To be honest, we don't need many defenders against Middlesbrough, as we've already alluded to. So we'll probably concede about 5 now. But that being said, I think it is a very interesting game to look at tactically and see how well drilled they've been, because they have had a good number of days off since they've last played compared to everyone else.
You say that about Arsenal as well. I've got some outlets reporting that you're actually playing a back 3 tonight, which would be
3-4-2-1 is what's being talked.
Yeah, the Arsenal official Twitter has put that out as the the formation, is there in the diagram. It's got Gabriel, Koscielny and Holding at left centre back, and then Ox, Rambo, Xhaka and Monreal as left wing back, and then Ozil Alexis sitting behind Olivier Giroud. But as we know, Arsenal are quite fluid in attack, so I'd probably just say Xhaka. Well, actually, Xhaka is probably the only one that's going to stick to his position. The rest of them are just going to be a free-for-all.
It's rolling a dice, though, isn't it? It's
I was going to say, it's got an element of balls out about it, hasn't it, Ross? I mean, the only thing I would say is if they are going to play a back 3, is it not surprising that, again, Theo Walcott's not in the side when you're playing essentially a left back in midfield in Nacho Monreal? Is it sort of almost the Alonso of Chelsea principle, in that you're playing a left back but he's kind of midfielder, is capable going forward? And in your opinion, does this essentially mean that Arsenal are going for goals this evening in a game that really they didn't go for it against Palace? So is this a sign that we're going to see an all action attacking Arsenal this evening potentially?
What I would actually say about that formation is it's something that I can already hear Drew punching the air in celebration over. I think to me it looks like an Arsenal side that's actually reacting to who they're playing. Because for far too long, Arsene Wenger has just had, this is my system, this is the way we're playing, this is how we do it regardless of whether a home or away, and this is Arsenal. This to me looks like he's looked at Borough and he said, right, they're going to want goals here. They're going to try and play wide with Downing and Gaston Ramirez. They're going to try and stretch us. We need more defenders on the field. We need to make sure we've got cover in as many areas as possible. And to me, it looks like a man that's actually measured his opponent rather than just said, right, here we are. So I think that's a really, really interesting squad that he's put out. And much will depend now on whether Borough can stick to a formation and stick to a game plan and try and exploit it. But I think it's just been confirmed now by Arsene Wenger that they're playing a 3 at the back. So, I mean, to me, that looks like for the first time, perhaps since I've been watching football, that Arsene Wenger has reacted to his opponents. You know, that's what it looks like to me. You as Arsenal fans might be able to tell me there's more to it with injuries and things like that necessitates a certain player dropping out, but that to me looks like a manager that's looking at Borough and thinking, right, we need to make sure we don't lose here. Let's see how we can target them.
Well, I, for one, am sceptical. I'm just not, I've been on this pod a number of times and said that the 3 at the back suits some clubs. I think it's a bit of a phase. The only thing I would say is, like you said, Ross, it suggests for once that a manager who apparently is tactically inept is having a look at the opposition and thinking, actually, we can have a go at this lot. So let's hope it goes well. Otherwise, I dread to think what the outpouring of reaction will be. But maybe we'll cover the outcome of this on next week's podcast. Interesting. Okay, right. So that kind of covers everything for the weekend that we've got. We didn't put a shout out for questions this week, mainly because we had quite a lot to get through, and we knew we'd have quite a lot of EFL stuff to bounce our way through as well. So we didn't put out a call for questions. So I'm just going to sort of simply ask you both one question myself. It's the same question to both of you. Which league or which part of a league mainly excites you heading into the run-in, and why? Josh, which part of a league and which league is most exciting to you?
For next week, top half of the Championship, and then for the rest of the season, I'm going to go with the top 4 race in the Premier League. But that might be because I've got further interests in both of those fights.
Particular areas. Yeah. And Ross, what about yourself?
I think if I was being completely neutral, I'd say the playoff run in League 2 because of the sheer volume of teams that could still make it. I think that's fascinating for anyone that just enjoys the sport, doesn't have a particular favourite club or a particular favourite league. I think League 2 is going to be a fascinating run-in, but my bias immediately says the Championship, not just the spot for 6th, because that could honestly be now down to 3 or 4 teams rather than just Sheffield Wednesday or Fulham, but the bottom half as well, the relegation scrap. Now that Zola's gone from Birmingham, it's completely changed the complexion of the fight to stay up. So, as a neutral, I'd say League 2 because that's just so wide open. But for me personally, it's the Championship.
Interesting. Well, I'm a little bit biased myself, but I think the top 4 race is probably going to go right to the wire. When you look at the fixtures, you've still got to play in the Premier League. I think it's Manchester derby still. There's still a North London derby. When you consider that Arsenal play Manchester City and Chelsea play Spurs in the FA Cup next weekend in the semi-finals, I think those 2 results will have a huge psychological impact on the teams in the leagues as well. So, that top 4 race for me is quite exciting. I have to say, I am slightly excited by the League 2 race as well because, as you said earlier, Ross, just anyone can win anything in that league. It just seems to be like, is it something like 3 points between is it 7 or 8 clubs for the playoff race, something like that?
I think I have written on in my notes here, it is Luton in 4th to Wickham in 13th. There's a gap of about 6 or 7 points. So
yeesh. So that could be very, very. And was it 3 games to go? I think.
Yeah,
in that
and
league,
I know what's going to happen. We're going to hit the end of the pod, like the end of the season, and we're going to get questions. Who do you think is going to go up in the playoffs in Leagues 2, 1, and the Championship? And no one's going to have any clue about League 2 because it could be anyone.
Literally could be any team, couldn't it? So if you're a League 2 expert, write in now we'll pay you good money, at least 10 pence for any bit of information you can give us. So please write in now. But yeah, one thing's for sure, we are getting to the business end of the season, and of course, business end of the season or not, you can still always buy stuff to represent your team colours. And where do you want to do that, I wonder? Well, you could maybe go to classicfootballshirts.co.uk, because you get 10% off with us. So if you nip along to that website, do drop us a DM. We have discount codes we can give you. You can get 10% off of their stocks. They, of course, are in partnership with our podcast. So go along and get your team colours and support your team and cheer them over the line, if you will, with some lovely merchandise. The main podcast will be back, this time tomorrow. So we're recording this podcast on Easter Monday. We'll be back a day late, if you will, for the main European podcast. As of tomorrow, everything went back a day this week because we had so much to get in on the Monday pod. So look out for that tomorrow. Loads and loads of things to get through, and stay tuned to us. We'll be covering all the twists and turns as we head into the final games of the season. Just a very quick side note as well. We've had a few people ask us questions in the last week about what happens to this podcast over the summer. Well, we will have a little bit of a break. I'm not going to lie. We've worked quite hard to make this podcast what it is, and indeed the team underneath myself has worked equally as hard as I have. I just turn up and say hello, really. So the team will certainly have a few weeks break. Obviously, we've got no European Championships to get through. I'm sure Ross, for one, is quite happy that we don't have to do daily podcasts again this summer. Wow, that was busy last year, but we will have a bit of a break, and then we might do a few specials over the summer. So look out for some more interviews. I'm very much planning on interviewing our individual co-hosts over the summer as well about some certain given subjects. I know Drew is very keen to chat to Joel about tactics on a podcast as well. So we will keep ourselves out there throughout the summer, but it'll be less of a structure, i.e. not every Monday or not every Sunday. It'll probably just be a pod every once in a while, and then before you know it, the season will be back underway again. So try not to miss us. But that's the summer. This is now. So my thanks to both Ross and to Josh for your time this evening, gentlemen.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And as usual, if you click that subscribe button on either our YouTube, our iTunes, or our SoundCloud pages, give us some love, share the podcast with your friends, or you can follow us at the FH Podcast. We will be back after Arsenal's crushing 5-1 victory over Middlesbrough tonight. Makes me a very happy man. Here's hoping anyway. Until next time, my thanks to my guests, and we've been the Football Hipsters. We'll speak to you very soon.